Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Warzone In Depth. In today's episode, I want to talk about the recent DMR-14 nerf. In the most recent patch, the DMR, Type 63, Diamantes, and Mac-10s all got nerfed, along with some other fixes and weapon rebalances. I was tempted to rush out a patch notes reading video yesterday, but decided instead to play on this new build of the game to see if what was done was good enough to rein in the DMR-14. In my opinion, the DMR, Type 63, and Diamante are definitely nerfed. They're not as strong as they used to be, but they're still very good weapons that are still going to be very popular for some time to come. I think the DMR-14 is still the king of Warzone, surprisingly, but it is less oppressive now. It's more of a king and less of an emperor of the mode, perhaps. The infinite Stim Glitch did get fixed, which is an actual godsend. That means in your in-game fights, you can fight them, normally and not have to worry about somebody hiding 300 miles away at the other end of the zone. And I wanted to let you know before we get into the stats of everything that you can use creator code DRIFTOR in the store. It has to be all caps and the O is a 0 like the number 0 from the number pad, which makes this video sponsored by Activision, but using my creator code helps support me. So basically what they did with the DMR-14 is it got its long range damage reduced and its range cut by a lot. The way the DMR-14 looks right now is kind of like this. Up close, headshots will deal 112 damage, but decrease down to 98 at long ranges. It previously didn't have that long range decrease. Body shots are 55 up close and then decrease down to 48 at long ranges. So we now have an actual long range damage to the DMR-14, whereas previously it was dealing the same damage at almost every single range. And this does change your shots to kill by +1 in all instances at long ranges, but maybe not necessarily up close. Interestingly, the DMR-14 maximum damage range got reduced by a whopping 70%. They cut the range on this weapon by 70%, which is just massive. It's one of the biggest nerfs I have seen in an incredibly long time. Previously used to be able to almost map people with this weapon, and now not so much. The DMR-14's range, before it starts dealing less damage, is now 1/3 of what it used to be. That is a huge and heavy-handed nerf to the DMR-14. They also changed the DMR's lower torso multiplier from 1.0x to 1.01x, so it's barely dealing any extra damage at all for body shots, and you're really only getting bonus damage for true headshots. Then they decided to take the DMR-14 and lower its bullet penetration value from sniper rifle down to assault rifle, which is probably where it should have been to begin with, so it's a little bit harder to wallbang people through obstructions in Warzone. The Type 63 was nerfed in a pretty similar way. It got the exact same bullet penetration nerf. It now no longer fires sniper penetration rounds, but rather assault rifle ones that are blocked by most things in the game. It also now has a long range damage that it hits quicker. It'll deal 124 damage up close, but then at its maximum range, it'll go down to 94. Body shots are 60 to 45, so we have more initial damage, but less long range damage and a higher rate of fire with the Type 63. So it's an interesting weapon, but I really struggle with its overall recoil pattern. Like the DMR-14, the Type 63 also got a 55% range reduction, which would be the second biggest range reduction nerf that I've seen in a very long time. Again, very heavy-handed and very significant. On top of that, they added additional recoil to the weapons. It said they adjusted the recoil patterns, so the DMR and Type 63 are supposed to kick more now, but based on my experience and some testing that I've done and seen other YouTubers do, we're talking like a 5% recoil reduction, increase. It's like a minor nerf to the recoil. They kick slightly more now than they used to. It's not very big, it's not very noticeable, and both of these weapons are still very spammable at long ranges, especially if you mount them. I don't think that many of you are going to notice the recoil changes that much, but you might, and it might make you miss a shot or two, but they're still pretty easy weapons to use. Moving along in these patch notes, the Mac-10 blueprints are all now dealing the same amount of damage as the base version. Previously, the Mac-10 got nerfed to deal less damage to the body and to the head, but the blueprints, for whatever reason, were retaining the original pre-nerf damage, so if you had paid money to have a blueprint, you just had an extra damage weapon, making it kind of pay to win. Well, now all of the versions of the weapon, including the blueprints, are dealing the same amount of damage, doing what it is supposed to be doing. The next nerf we have to talk about today is the Diamante pistols, more specifically the Akimbo Diamantes, but the Diamante's base damage got reduced from 45 down to 40, and all multipliers were set to 1x. So this weapon used to deal bonus damage if you hit chest, and quite a bit of bonus damage if you hit somebody in the head. You could quite literally delete them off the face of this earth instantly. So we have less base damage and far weaker multipliers. This is pretty much all centered around running at Akimbo. So now the Akimbo Diamatti can no longer one-shot burst people if they have full armor. If they have full health and you get right up in their face and burst both pistols, 6 shots straight to the head, it can't actually kill them, which is a little bit crazy. It almost seems kind of bonkers, but I think it's a very fair nerf. So now, no matter what you're doing with the Akimbo Diamattis, you're always going to have to use at least 2 bursts to kill people, unless, of course, they're very low on armor. The Diamatti still retains its lower range, or faster damage fall-off, and its wider hipfire spread from the last nerf. So all combined, these are pretty similar nerfs, and they're kind of going down the path of the Renetti, but not quite committing to it yet. So, in my opinion, the DMR and Type 63 are still very viable meta weapons, and maybe still the best weapons in Warzone. I played with them all night, I used a variety of old and new guns, and at the end of the day, I think the DMR-14 performed better for me than anything else. It was still relatively easy to use and spam and just pummel people at long ranges. Even if it didn't deal the same amount of damage, the ease of use was important, and it still kind of shreked people up close. Headshots still dealt a significant amount of damage, even if they were lower than before. And I think the majority of the people in my squad all agreed that the DMR was still very good. It was challenging to fight against. Type 63 hasn't changed a whole lot. It's basically in the same boat. It's a different flavor of DMR. I will say that their overall time to kill and performance over range went down a lot. It's not as easy to just kind of delete people at super long ranges, but they still slap up close. However, up close isn't really where you want to be using a slow weapon like that, especially when you have some new Cold War weapons that kill you very, very quickly. In my opinion, the DMR-14 is a bit less oppressive to fight against, especially if it's a full squad of people spamming them. It used to be you just turn the corner and die instantly. Everybody on the squad would fire once and you'd just be toast because somebody would get a headshot. You can actually fight back now. You can use an assault rifle to pick off a DMR user depending on your range and setup. There's, there are counters. There's reasonable combat to go on, but I still think that they're the best weapons in Warzone, so it's still going to be a DMR-centric meta. I think that they need to be nerfed to be shooting sniper ammo. If they're going to perform that well, they don't need a gigantic ammo pool so that you can spam it relentlessly. You need to make people a little bit more conservative with their shots. One interesting thing that I did notice throughout the night is that there were people playing around with the FAL and SKS trying to sort of replace the now nerfed DMR. And I think their general goal or idea was like, well, if the DMR is nerfed, I'm going to use the next best or closest statistically similar thing. And to be honest, it fooled me. Fighting somebody with the FAL or the SKS felt a lot like fighting somebody with the DMR. So even if they further nerf the DMR, players might fall back to these two weapons for the meta. Moving along, the Diamatti pistols no longer insta-kill people, which is the most important nerf that you can give them. But I do want to clarify that they're still very strong weapons. They're close quarters combat DPS output is higher than anything in the game, higher than shotguns as far as I'm aware. You might not be able to just click and delete like before, and especially with the wider hip fire, maybe not at the same range, but they are still excellent backup weapons. I was able to use them in a variety of combat scenarios very effectively. They're still something that you're going to have to fear and respect, and I still think that they're a little bit too powerful to just be a secondary that you can get even without overkill. I would probably lower the damage just a little bit more so that you have to land more shots on these things to kill people. Basically the same story here with the Mac-10. It's still a very strong weapon. It's got a very fast time to kill. It's easy to use, but now it's more fair. It's more consistently strong. You're not getting a boatload of extra damage just because you bought the variant. And I still am of the opinion that the Mac-10 might be in need of a slight nerfing because it's still very, very strong in close quarters combat, and it even out-edges both of the MP5s in the game as far as I'm aware. There were also attachment updates for Call of Duty Warzone. Most of them, I think, are still broken. They kind of played around with the foregrips a little bit and added and took apart, but still like 90% of the attachments for Cold War weapons are busted or do things backwards from what they say they're going to do. So that's going to be something I'll have to do in a totally later in-depth with further testing. You're still kind of going blind in terms of attachments on your weapons. Overall, this patch is a step in the right direction. I think that we're moving the right way, kind of maybe taking a step down at a time, letting the DMR get a little bit weaker, letting the Renettis and Macs get a little bit weaker, but it's still probably too slight of a nerf for these weapons. These weapons do still dominate the meta. I think they're going to dominate for a long time. That might even be planned. They might really want Cold War weapons to be the best in order to like boost sales of that game so you can grind them out or something. I personally would nerf them or change them a little bit more. It might actually even be fun to give a pretty significant weapon rebalance to Call of Duty Warzone, just to, spice it up a little bit and kind of see what's going on. There were no changes to skill-based matchmaking and no fixes on the easy bot lobby glitches as far as I'm aware. Over time, after making the video, people have not only been able to replicate my little cheat, but also find new interesting ways to cheat and get bot lobbies. There was no mention of skill-based matchmaking, no design goal, no overhaul, no promise of that to change. So as far as I'm concerned, the skill matching is going to be the way it is until the end of time. Near the end of the video, I wanted to point out some Cold War weapons that might become meta very soon. People might start liking these more than the Modern Warfare weapons, or maybe even more than the DMR-14. You should look out for the Groza assault rifle. It's got an excellent time to kill, predictable recoil, big mags, good handling. The FFAR is incredible in a lot of ways. It shoots so fast, it shreds people up close, very similarly to the AS Val. And I had a pretty fun time using it, except it was miserable at long ranges. The Cold War MP5 outperforms the Modern Warfare 19 MP5 in some ways and not in others. J-God's pushing that to be very meta. And I gotta say, the AK-47, the Black Ops Cold War AK-47, is very underrated. It doesn't kill quite as quickly as the Groza or the FFAR, and the recoil on it is somewhat problematic, but the damage per shot is very high, so it's a very efficient weapon for dropping squads and getting headshots, and it can be fun to use. I think that now that I'm kind of winding down on weapon guides for regular Black Ops Cold War in depth, what I'm going to be doing is trying out these weapons and trying to break the meta with them in Warzone, so you might see a shift on this channel back to more Warzone content. Guys, that is all for this in-depth episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.